All right, guys, so before we get started with the new note sheet, questions on the homework? Questions on any of the homework assignments? Now, I will say I forgot to say yesterday, one of the problems from last night's homework is not factorable at all. So it's not factorable. And one of the problems, the only thing we can do is pull out a greatest common factor. Now, one thing that is interesting or of note is that if we're not sure if something is factorable, we can use this here, square root of b squared minus 4ac. Now, I'm not just pulling this out of nowhere. This is actually from the quadratic formula, because our negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, the reason I pull this part out to test if it's factorable or not is this is part of the answer. Because if we're using the quadratic formula, our negative b plus or minus the square root, this whole formula, it gives us the answer. But the square root part, when we talked about the discriminant and that finding types of solutions, it told us that if we have a radical, if whatever that is doesn't take an even root, that means we're going to have irrational solutions. Well, if we have irrational solutions, it's not factorable. If this simplifies down and gives us an I term, a complex solution, it means it's not factorable. So we could take something like 2x squared minus 56x plus 2. There's a greatest common factor. Well, let's just make it 3, so we don't have any greatest common factor. There is no greatest common factor between these three terms, and there's a good chance, no matter how we factor 2 and 3, there's not a way to get 56 as a middle term. So, if I want to just make sure, well, b squared minus 4ac. Our b value is negative 56. Our a value is 2. C value is 3. So I can just plug it in. Second square root. Negative 56 squared minus 4 times 2 times 3. Gives us 55.7853 going on, so it's an irrational number. So it's not factorable. Now that doesn't tell us anything about how it factors or what it does. It just tells us this does not factor. Does that make sense? So taking that square root of b squared minus 4ac is not so much helping us solve it or factor it, it's just can it factor or can't it factor? And I find that is a good way to where if we're looking at something like this here, 7x squared minus 31x minus 20, I'm trying to factor it, I'm working on it. Let me throw it in here, just make sure it does factor. Okay, it does. I might be missing a factor. Because if we looked at this here, this does factor. And if I wanted to just check it and make sure, b squared, so negative 31 squared, minus 4 times a times c. Second square root, negative 31 squared, minus 4 times 7 times negative 20. It gives us 39. Now that doesn't tell us anything about how it's going to factor or what it's going to do. It just says, yes, it is factorable. If we don't get a radical or an I term, we just get an integer, all it's saying is yes, this thing will factor. That's all it's told us. It's just kind of a way to verify that we don't or can't go any further. Here we can. So 7x squared minus 31x minus 20. First thing we need to look for factoring these quadratics is a greatest common factor. We need to see if there is a number or variable or both that can go into all three. So we have 7, 31, and 20. We need to see if a number would go into all three. Well, the only numbers that would go into 7 are 1 and 7. 31 may or may not be, but we know 20 is not divisible by 7. So there is no greatest common factor amongst these three terms. So We'll go to our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces since there is no greatest common factor. So that takes us to step 2. Now we can go to step 3, find the sign. When we're looking for the sign, again, we look at the third term sign. If it's positive, the signs are the same and match the sign in the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. Well, what's the sign of our third term? Negative, so our signs are opposite. One's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. Now, which one we put as plus, which one we put as minus at this point really doesn't matter. We just need to put one of the signs as plus, one of the signs as minus. Now we need to look at the factors of the first and third terms. Our first term is 7x squared, yes? What are the factors of the x squared part? 1 and 7, and then we have x and x, yes? X squared is just x and x, only one choice for that. Factors of 7 are 1 and 7, yes? Do we have any others? No. And for me, whenever I realize I only have one set of factors, I'm just going to throw them in. X and x for our x squared, 1 and 7, so just 7 in front of one of the x's. Now it feels like we need to figure out, does it need to go in the first, does it need to go in the second? At this point, doesn't matter. Because our last thing we're going to do before we finish is check and make sure it works. Now the other one we have is factors of 20. Now 20 is going to have more than one factor. Because we do have 1 and 20, but we also have 2 and 10. 3 is not a factor. 4 and 5, we have them all. Because our next factor after 4 would be 5. It's already listed, so we're good there. Which one of these do we want to try first? 4 and 5. And again, with this here, with factoring these, I would just pick one that seems like it could be, might work. Let's put it in and check it. And again, just like yesterday, we're not going to worry about doing 7x times x, because that's still 7x squared. 4 times negative 5 is still negative 20. The ones we want to check is our 7x times negative 5. 7 times negative 5 is going to be negative 35, and we do still have that x. 4 times x is going to give us plus 4x. Negative 35x plus 4x, negative 35 plus 4 is going to give us negative 31x. Is that the middle term we wanted? Yes. So we are finished. Questions on this here? If that hadn't worked out to be the middle term, the first thing I'd do is switch to 4 and 5. Try it again. If that didn't work, then I would move to 2 and 10. Put it in 2 of the spots, check it, see if it works. If it doesn't, flip them. But since that worked, we're done. Questions on this here? Yes. Questions on this so far? Okay.
It's like this clear jelly. It's like full of me.
Okay. Let's look at the next one. 2b squared plus 17b plus 21. So the first thing we want to look for is the greatest common factor. We want to see if there's a number or variable or both that will go in all three. Well, we have b squared b, no variable. So there's not a variable in all three, so that's out. So then we're looking for a number that's in common with 2, 17, and 21. Well, if there is one, the small or the biggest one we could have would be 2. Yes? Because it would have to go 2, 17, 21. Looking for a number that divides in all three. There isn't one. There's no greatest common factor, so we move on to step 2. Any questions on any of this so far? Step 3 is to find the sign. And with our 2 statements, it's really focused on the sign of our third term. And what is the sign of the third term? Positive. Since it's positive, the signs are going to be the same, and they're going to match the sign of the middle term. And the sign of our middle term is positive. So we're going to have plus and plus. Now we need to find the factors of the first and third term. So our first term is 2b squared, yes? If we look at the variable b squared, well, its only factors are what? B and b. So only way that that works, no matter what our number is, it has to be b and b. We can plug it in. What are the factors of 2? 1 and 2. Are there any other factors? No. So we can put the 2 in front of one of the b's, 1 in front of the other. Because really 2b squared, the only factors we have are 2b and b. Only way that works out, the only way we can multiply them together. Now we look at the factors of 21. So we're trying to see what multiplies together to give us 21. We do have 1 and 21, yes? Is 2 a factor? No, 2 doesn't divide evenly. How about 3? 3 and 7. And most likely that's going to be it because 4 is not a factor. 21 does not divide by 4 evenly. It would be 5.25. 5 doesn't work because it doesn't end in 0 or 5, and that'd really be it. Because 6 wouldn't work, 7 is already up there. What do we want to try first, 1 and 21 or 3 and 7? 3 and 7. Which one do we want to put with the 2b, 3 or 7? 3 and 7. And then we're going to check. 2b times 7, positive 2b times positive 7, or 2 times 7 is going to give us 14. And we have the b term. 3 times b, positive 3 times positive b, would be positive 3b, giving us 14b plus 3b, 14 plus 3, would give us positive 17b, which is the middle term that we wanted. So we're done. And just because we don't get the setup on the first try, that's not bad. We just need to switch the 3 and 7, try again. And if that doesn't work, then we would go to 1 and 21 and try it in both of its ways. Setups, fashions, questions. All right, so our answer for this is 2b plus 3 times b plus 7. Because this is just our check, our verify that the factors that we got are the correct factors. Are you ready for the next one? 7x squared minus 45x minus 28. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? Possibly, because the factor that could work is 7. And we can make sure 45 divided by 7 is, because 28 is divisible by 7, yes? But our middle term of 45 does not, because it really does look like 7 is a common factor. It is between 7 and 28. But unfortunately, since 45 is not divisible by 7, we don't have a greatest common factor. Focus in. Focus in. So, if 7 wasn't divisible by 7, 45, and 28, we don't have a common factor. But we can still move on to step 2, our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Now to find the sign, we look at the sign of the third term. And our third term is negative. So the signs are opposite. One's going to be plus, one is going to be minus. And after we get that, we'll look at the factors of the first and third term. So our first term is 7x squared. We know the factors of the x squared part are going to be x and x. What are the factors of 7? 1 and 7. And that's still the only set of factors, yes? So we could write it out, 7x and x, and write all those factors out, but since we know it's x and x, that's the only set, we'll plug it in. 7, 1, and 7. So those are the only factors, we just plug them in. 28. Well, 28 is probably going to have more than one set of factors because we do know it's even. So 1 and 28, we also have 2 and 14. Is 3 divisible, or 3 a factor? No, 2 plus 8 is 10. 10 is not divisible by 3, so 28 is not. 4 and 7. 5 is not going to be a factor because it does not end in 0 or 5. 6 is not going to be a factor because, well, 3 wasn't, because 2 and 3 have to be a factor for 6 to be a factor. 7's already listed. Which one of these do we want to try first? 4 and 7. I'll put 7 here, 4 here. And we can check this here. 7x times negative 4, 7 times negative 4 is going to be negative 28x. Positive 7 times positive x is plus 7x. And negative 28x plus 7x, negative 28 plus 7 is negative 21x. Is that the middle term that we wanted? No, we wanted it to be 45, yes? Now, one thing else that's interesting to note, in that first set of parentheses, what do we have? We have 7x plus, is there a greatest common factor between those two terms? Well, we have a common factor of 7, yes? So if there's a common factor in a set of parentheses in this work, that means that 7 could be factored out. We could divide it out and move it out front, yes? But if there's a common factor in any set of parentheses, there means there had to be one to begin with. Because it could have factored out to begin with if we can factor it out in either of the parentheses, yes? Was there a greatest common factor to begin with? No, 7, 45, and 28 are not all divisible by 7, yes? So could we put 7x and 7 together? No. Did checking it also tell us it didn't work? Yeah. So if we notice, well, erase that. Let's see how many times it takes. There we go. That there is no common factor, well, 7x and 7 can't go together because they would have a common factor. Just tells me that arrangement won't work. But also, if I didn't notice that, checking it still told me that 7x plus 7 times x minus 4 was not a factor anyways. Now, if we switch it and try again, 7x times negative 7, 7 times negative 7 is going to give us negative 49x. 4 times x is going to give us positive 4x. Negative 49x plus 4x, negative 49 plus 4 would be negative 45x. Is that what we wanted? Yeah. So that's our answer. 7x plus 4 times x minus 7. Questions on this here? Questions on anything so far? We ready for the next one? Five p squared minus p minus 18. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? Well, the only thing, guys, let's focus in. The only thing that can go into all three would be 1. So there is no greatest common factor we can factor out. That would help making factors this simpler or nicer. So we'd have our two sets of parentheses with three spaces. Third term sign, is it positive or negative? Negative, so the signs are opposite. One is going to be positive, one is going to be negative. Now we need to find the factors of the first and third term. So 5p squared. Well, the factors of p squared are p and p. Those are the only factors of p squared that will work. Now we can also look at the factors of the leading coefficient, the number with our p squared, which is 5, 1 and 5. And for most of the ones we've worked today, that's the only set of factors. It only had 1 and 5, 1 and 7. Yes. Yes. So we can just put the 5 in one and put the one in front of the other and get this here. Factors of 18. 2 and 9, 3 and 6. Which one do we want to try first? 2 and 9? Let's try this here. 5p times negative 9, 5 times negative 9 is going to be negative 45p. 2 times p is going to be plus 2p. Negative 45p plus 2p is going to be negative 43p. Is that the middle term we wanted? No. So the first thing we can try is flipping 2 and 9. And see how that changes the middle term. 5p times 2, negative 2, 5 times negative 2, would give us negative 10p. Positive 9 times positive p would be plus 9p. And negative 10p plus 9p, negative 10 plus 9 would be negative 1, negative 1p, which is the middle term we wanted, yes? So it works out there. Now, even though the middle term is small, it ends up being our second set of factors actually gave us the right answer, interestingly enough. Questions on this here? 10m squared plus 89m minus 9. Unfortunately, there is no greatest common factor between these three terms. 10, 89, and 9 do not share a number divisibility across all three. So we don't have a greatest common factor, but we can still go to two sets of parentheses with three spaces. The third term sign is negative, so the signs are going to be opposite. One is going to be plus, and one is going to be minus. Now we're going to look at the factors of the first and third term. So our first term is 10m squared. Now we know the factors of m squared are going to be m and, all right guys, focus, m and m. Now the factors of 10, we actually do have more than one this time, because 10 is 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. Which one do we want to try first? 1 and 10. And I would agree, I would lean towards 1 and 10 over 2 and 5 because that middle term is quite big. We're going quite far away from 10 and 9. Now the factors of the third term, we do have 1 and 9 or 3 and 3. Which one of these do we want to try first? 1 and 9. So I'm just going to put them in here and give this a try. Now 10m times negative 1, 10 times negative 1 would be negative 10m. 9 times m, positive 9 times positive m, would give us positive 9m. And negative 10m plus 9m is negative m. So that's not quite the middle term that we wanted. So we can switch the 1 and 9 and try it again. Now 10m times negative 9, 10 times negative 9 would be negative 90m. Positive 1 times positive m, 1 times m is going to be plus m. And negative 90m plus m, negative 90 plus 1 would be negative 89m. Is that the middle term that we wanted? No, it is the correct number, but wrong sign. So what we can do is flip the signs, which would now change it to positive 10 times positive 9, giving us positive 90m. Negative 1 times positive m would give us negative m, telling us that we have 90 minus m, which would give us our positive 89m. Now it is possible to fix the sign error without changing the signs, but to do that we would have to switch the 10m and m and the 1 and 9. We'd have to actually flip everything but the signs. I think it's a little bit easier just to flip the signs than it is to switch everything else. Questions on any of this here? Do we feel comfortable with this? Feeling a lot better with this so far? All right. Let's skip this one and go to this one here. 28 n to the fourth plus 16 n to the third minus 80 n squared. Now the first thing we want to do with this here is see if there is a greatest common factor across these three terms. Now one of the things that we do have is we have a variable for the first time in all three spots. So what that is telling me is that n is a greatest common factor. How many n's can we actually take out of all three terms? 2, because the smallest exponent is 2. So that means I can factor n squared out of n to the fourth, n to the third, and n squared. Now most likely there is a common factor between 28, 16, and 80. There is a greatest common factor between those three numbers. We're looking for greatest common factor. We're looking for the biggest number that can divide into all three, yes? So what's the smallest of those three numbers? 16. And it seems odd, why am I looking at that one in particular? Because what is the biggest number I can divide 16 by? 16. I mean, that's the number itself, yes? So looking for greatest common factor, I know that the biggest factor can't be bigger than 16 because that's the smallest number in the group. So if we look at the factors of 16, and we know what those are, we can see what possible factors go into all three. It limits the number of numbers that we look at. But I have a feeling 16 is not going to divide by 28 or 80. And we can check. 28 divided by 16 doesn't work. What's another number that divides by 16, or 16 is divisible by? 4. 28 divided by 4 is 7. 80 divided by 4 is 20. So we can factor out a 4 because 4 is in common in all three. So what we're really doing here is dividing each of these by 4n squared. 28 divided by 4 is 7. N to the fourth divided by n squared is going to give us n squared. Guys, let's focus. 16 cubed, we're also going to divide by 4n squared. Our 16 divided by 4 is going to give us 4. N cubed divided by n squared is going to give us n. Minus. And lastly, we're going to divide the 80n squared by 4n squared. 80 divided by 4 would be 20. And the n squared would factor out completely. So here the greatest common factor between these three terms is 4n squared. If you're not sure, we can factor out ones that we know for sure, because we could have factored out 2. We would have seen that there's another factor of 2, and we could factor it out again. Questions on this here? Questions on greatest common factor? Now we can move on to our second step, our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. The sign of our third term is negative, so the signs have to be opposite, plus and minus. Now we need to find the factors of the first and third term. First term 7n squared. The n squared would be n and n. Factors of 7, 1 and 7, so we only have one choice. Plug it in. 20, we have a few. 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. Which ones do we want to try first? 2 and 10? And we can check this here. 7n times negative 10, 7 times negative 10 would give us negative 70, or in this case, negative 70n. Positive 2 times positive n, 2 times n, positive 2n plus 2n. Negative 70n plus 2n, negative 70 plus 2 would give us negative 68n. Unfortunately, that is not the middle term that we want. But before I switch to a different set of factors of 20, might as well try switching the 2 and 10. 7n times negative 2 would be negative 14n. 10 times n would be positive 10n. Negative 14n plus 10n, negative 14 plus 10 would be negative 4n. Now, yes, we can't plug the variables in the calculator, but we can do the coefficients. So our 7 times negative 2, 10 times 1, negative 14 plus 10, giving us negative 4n. But we didn't want negative 4n, we wanted positive 4n, so we switched the signs. Questions on this here? So did having this greatest common factor with a variable make this any different? A little bit, just the first step making sure to factor it out, but after that, everything ran the exact same, yes? We're going to look at 2 more, this one and 1 more, and then we will be done for the day. No more notes after that. What we have here is 3b squared minus 3b cubed minus 5b squared plus 2b. Is there a greatest common factor between these 3 terms? B. How many b's can we factor out of all 3? 1, because the third term is just 2b. Now, is there a number we can factor out of 3, 5, and 2? 1 is the only one. So the only thing we can factor out is a common factor of b. Now, factoring it out, removing it from all 3, is just going to decrease the power of b from b cubed to b squared. B squared to b to the first are just b. And the third term, 2b, is just going to become 2. We're just removing one of the b's from all 3. Two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. third term is positive, so the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term, which is negative. So we'll have negative and negative. Factors of 3b squared, well, the b squared would be b and b. Factors of 3. Any others? Nope. Yeah, it's prime. 1 and 3. Factors of the third term, factors of 2. Any others? Okay. So we can just plug those in. Because, I mean, up to this point, there's always been more than one factor with the third term. Doesn't have to be. So we can plug these in and see if this works. First thing we have is 3b times negative 2. 3 times negative 2 would be negative 6b. Negative 1 times b is negative b. Negative 6b minus b, negative 6 minus 1 would give us negative 7b. Is that the middle term we wanted? No. What could we change? Yeah, we can flip the 1 and 2, yes? And see if this changes anything. 3b times negative 1 is going to be negative 3b. Negative 2 times positive b would be negative 2b. Negative 3 minus 2 is negative 5b. Now, even though we did have one set of factors, because the ones for b was 3b and b, 3 and 1, flipping it did do something. If it had just been b and b, flipping it wouldn't have changed anything. Questions on this here? Are you ready for the last one? 30n squared b minus 87n b plus 30b. Is there a greatest common factor? Yeah. B. B is in common with all three. Because we have actually just B in common with all three. 30, 87, and 30. Is there a greatest common factor with those three numbers? 3? Let's try 3. So we'll take 3b out of all three. Yep. 30 divided by 3 is going to give us 10. We still have the n squared, but the b factors out completely. 87 divided by 3 is indeed 29. We still have the n, but our b factors out completely. 30 divided by 3 is 10. B factors out completely. So we really just removed b out of all three terms. We're still left with the n squared n, and we divided each number by 3. Giving us this here. Now again, with greatest common factor, if that's a struggle, hard to see the greatest common factor, some of the things I would default to is what is a common factor that we do see? Factor it out, and then check the numbers again. So if we weren't sure that 3 was the greatest common factor, but we know it is a common factor, I can then factor it out and look back. 10, 29, 10. Is there a common factor between these three? So 10 would be 2, 5, or 10. 29 is not divisible by 2, 5, or 10, so we're done. If there is another common factor, we can do it again. We can factor it again, and we just put it next to the number in front, and we multiply those again. Now we can move on to our next step. Our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. The third term is positive. Yes? So the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. And our middle term sign is negative. So we'll get negative and negative. Questions on this here? Factors of the first term. So we have 10n squared, yes? So what are the factors of n squared? N and n, yes? And because of multiplication, we can look at the factors separately. We don't have to do it all at once. Factors of 10. 1 and 10. 2 and 5. Which one do we want to try first? 10 and 1? 10 and 1. Now we need to find the factors of the third term, which would be factors of, well, 10, yes? Well, that would be 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. What do we want to try first? 2 and 5. And we can check and make sure to see if we get negative 29n. 10n times negative 5 would be negative 50n. Negative 2 times n would be negative 2n. Negative 50n minus 2n would be negative 52n. That doesn't work. So we could try flipping it, yes? Five and 2. 10n times negative 2. 10 times negative 2 would be negative 20n. Negative 5 times n would be negative 5n, giving us negative 25. Is that the middle term we wanted? Now we did say from 10n squared, 29n and 10, there was no more greatest common factors, yes? So looking at it here, 10n and minus 5, is there a common factor between these two? So could we put 10n and 5 together? No. But even if we don't see that, or when we had it as 2 and 5, does 10n and 2 have a common factor? It's just a quick way to say these don't work. If we don't see it, that's fine, because when we checked it, it also told us that these weren't the correct factors. So my next choice is to switch to 1 and 10. 10n times negative 10 is negative 100n. Negative 1 times n is negative n, giving us negative 101n. That's not the middle term we want. Now the only possible arrangement we have left with our 10n and n is 10 and 1, but that gives us 10n minus 10. They have a common factor of 10. So what we have to switch is to 2n and 5n. And my only choice I really have is going to be this here. 2n times negative 2 is negative 4n. Negative 5 times 5n is negative 25n, giving us negative 29n, which is the middle term we wanted. And that's it. On your way out, grab a worksheet.